This is Cindy, the crazy old sock lady. It's good to be back. Thank you for coming back to see us. Don't forget to like and subscribe down below. We appreciate you. Today is CSM tips and tricks, and one of the first things we're going to talk about is getting everything aligned so that you don't drop stitches. Okay, as you saw in the picture we just showed you, there was everything, the light and the mast is all off-centered from the cylinder. So you just thread your machine like you always do. But I have a little trick. These are kebab skewers that I've cut in half with a pair of scissors. And I have my 12 and 6 o'clock marked. And I have my 3 and 9 o'clock marked. And so what I do is I get everything kind of where it's lined up, where I want it to be. And because this lamp kind of sits in the center, I just make sure everything gets over. And so that shows my center mark, so I don't have to use a lot of stuff. So let's see, we're almost there. And so now what's wonderful about this is it always feels like this, but the closer I am to center here, when it spins around, if it's centered around my light, if this is way off, it's going to rub there, you can drop stitches. If it's way off down here, same thing, because it's got to stretch too far to get to the stitches, and it's just a problem. So there's our first tip and trick. I have this set up for a mock rib sock because I like those. And so I always start, and this is where I always choose to start, I always start hanging my cast on bonnet at 3 o'clock and head towards noon. You're going to notice I hook mine funny because I have the mock rib here. So here's a nice little hack. You do every other stitch, right? Well, this one would fall on a needle that doesn't have one. So I go ahead and I just use them all. But this one is supposed to fall here. And so I just do this. And so wherever it's supposed to fall, oh, if I can, well, that's an odd one. So then I'll just always go backwards. Then I skip, and it's right there. And so you go ahead and you do this all the way around like some crazed old woman. Like that's right, and that's right. It gets easier when you get to where you're supposed to be. There's another one of those doubles. And then you always remember when you do this, like on the Ford one, this is 60 slot cylinder. And when I get here, it becomes easy because then it's just every other one, just like always. And so I just do this. And if my needles are closed when I'm doing this, I go ahead and I open them. I've pulled out all my little tools that I'll need for this job in particular. And I'll crank this little beast all the way over as far as I can get it before I add any more yarn, just because that means it's just less to do later. Alright, so I've got it all on there. I set this down. Now I pick, oops, I'm lying to you. Guess what I didn't do? Before I start each pair of socks, I always oil the machine all the way around. And so I literally take this little bad boy and I oil the spring. And the reason I oil the spring is because the spring will hold the oil in part. What falls down will oil the bottom of the butts of the needles, which we should oil. But what's nice is the spring with the surface tension will hold enough oil that it'll help keep the latches lubricated, which is really awesome. Now, I can't see what I'm doing, so I've learned to kind of do this by feel. I just learned how to stay on the spring. I'm not sure how I got lucky and did that. And yeah, I make a little mess here and there. That's all right. I'd rather have too much oil than not enough. The oil's inexpensive. You can buy it by the gallon for 30 bucks. I did that. But I have the 4 bottles that I need for my machines. I keep them in, when it's not in use, in the mason jar with a little part of an oil pad down in there. And the reason I do that is to keep oil off the table. But when it's not in use, I have a little coaster for it, because I then use the jar to hold my waste yarn and my ravel cord. Now, here's my yarn. It's lovely shades of blues and taupes. Hot pink ravel cord, hot pink waste yarn, and a lavender ravel cord. Why? They're highly contrasting. I can easily tell these apart from this and this. And they're just nice and tiny and tidy. So, yeah, they are a little fat. Yes, I do have a lot on there. But if something happens to it, after I've used it several times and I need to cut some off, I can cut some off and it's still usable. So, of course, one of the tips that I want to tell you about that I've had to do with all of my little fancy yarn guides from Erlbacher is when they come in, they all tend to be rough around these little openings and the little slits on them. Here, especially this one right here on the back tends to be the most difficult. I think it's because it's at an angle. These are brass, so they're pretty easy to work with. And I have found that I can take 4/0 steel that you can buy at Walmart or Harbor Freight or any place fairly inexpensively, and I tear off a little piece and I just rub it. And if I've got a spot that's especially rough, okay, so now that we know that the machine is set up and everything is centered and aligned, because getting everything set up right from the get-go is where you're really going to save yourself some time and a lot of frustration. So I don't put my weight in just yet. I just kind of do this because this little machine is funny. I can't get that yarn guide any closer, so I just kind of run my thumbs around. I have to do this because I couldn't get all the stitches, all the loops on the needles because, well, they were down. So we'll do that. And voila. And so then I do toe-up socks exclusively. So I always use soft weights that I've made, and I like this much better. This is a 2.5 pound weight, and if you look down here, my bag is a closed bag. It has a little deal on it so I can hang it up when it's not in use. So I just drop the weight down in the bag and try not to catch the needles like that. Okay, so now we have our waste yarn on. So I like the slotted yarn carrier, and this is why, or the slotted yarn guide, and whatever it is, I don't know. So now we're going to put on a row of ravel cord. This is one I haven't used yet, so I haven't got it trimmed yet. I usually cut these about in half because I don't need all of it, and half will fit either on the Bumblebee, it'll fit on the Harmony Auto Knitter, and it will fit on my Speedsters. So the 60 and the 72 slot cylinder. I don't know if it would be impacted by anything else. So what I've done is I've threaded in the ravel cord. This is my waste yarn. Here's my half mark, the little green spot. That's my half mark on this one. And so what I want to do is I want to make sure that I don't overlap these. I want that space. Because there's a reason for that. You'll see it in a minute, and later on it'll become wonderfully apparent why I do it. So I pull the waste yarn up to keep that needle engaged here, and I hold the ravel cord down with my finger so that they both knit. And as soon as they both knit, then I can let it go. And I go one time around with the ravel cord is all. And I stop right where my waste yarn stopped. So what I want to do, because like I said, I've never used this one before, I know I can cut it about here. So when I get around to about 6 o'clock, I would like to raise the back half of the needles while I'm putting on the ravel cord, because otherwise you kind of back things up and it's a little sketchy. But it's the same thing. I pull it out just like I did the waste yarn. I'm going to pull it out to the side here. I move this little guy out of my way. I pull my cone or my whatever I've got going here. And we're going to thread this through just like always. Nothing different. Nothing changes. I do like to add about 6 or 8 inches inside, and I'll show you because that's one of the tips and tricks for later. And let me do this wrong again, because what I want to do, because I didn't do this, I want to go all the way past. I want to sink that. I'm sorry, I'm not used to doing this and talking, so please bear with me as I figure it out. You want to, like always, click past the last click. So, but the ravel cord trick is this. You take your end, and I like it a little bit longer because I want it to hang lower. You see this little opening we've left here? Because we didn't put stitches, you know, any kind of crossbars in between. I drop this down in here like this. The reason for that is later, after I do the toe and I do the body of the foot, I can pull the ravel cord out and it's already ready to go. Okay, everybody, we're back. We've cranked out 45 rows and got the body of the sock done for my little tiny fat foot. And I want to take this off. I want this out of my way because, as you can see, I'm not using it, so it's just in my way. So you notice, remember how we stuck out that ravel cord down between those two stitches where it didn't have the bar? This is why. So I can literally, while the sock's still on the machine, reach in here and pull this out, because when you do a toe-up sock, ta-da, when you do a toe-up sock, you know that you have to, you only do one at a time. And if you don't know that, that's news, because I haven't tried doing a snake. I imagine it's possible. I don't know why you'd want to, just because it's so much easier this way for me if you do a toe-up sock, but some people might want to. I might play with that someday. So after I get the ravel cord off, I go ahead and I wrap it back up on its little embroidery floss cards. I like the plastic ones because they're more durable and I don't have to throw them away, and I'll just keep them forever. And so I take a little mini break before I start my heel. One of the things I like to do, so I know where I am so I don't forget. And vapor lock, I'll just raise my needles. So even if I have to walk away, I'm good. I know right where I am. So as an afterthought, one of the things that did happen to me here a while back was I had needle barf. And if you don't know what needle barf is, well, you'll learn. I think it's a rite of passage along with many of the things that come with this. But if you're cranking your machine and it's tight and you just know you're that close, I was in the very last row, last few stitches. And what had happened was, remember how I showed you how to hang these? Well, I didn't know that. Remember how I showed you that when you hang it over here, that you have to go and don't go forward, go back? Well, I went forward, and then I went forward. And all it did was make it tighter and tighter. So I was literally cranking the last row around on the hung hem for a sock. And it was so tight, I had needle barf. It's a scary thing when it happens because the whole thing just snaps and everything just pukes out everywhere. It's horrible. So when you, like I said, when we were first hanging that toe, make sure you go backwards, don't go forwards, because that will cause needle barf every time. But it was a fun experience, and I actually could do nothing but laugh, and everybody was crying for me, was upset for me. We have wonderful sock groups, and everybody's just so supportive and so encouraging, and all I could do was laugh. I frogged the sock, and I started over, and I made a beautiful pair of socks. So life was good. But yeah, needle barf. And Walter taught me that. This is Walter, and I didn't give him a proper shout out the other day. Walter, I told you the story of his background, but I didn't tell you who Walter is to me. Walter is Bobby's husband, and he was my foster dad. And he was a strong man that taught me a lot about work ethics and getting up and going to taking care of business every day, just because that's what you're supposed to do. So I have Walter and Bobby, which they're properly seated across and diagonally from each other as they would be at a proper dinner table at a friend's home. Because seating mattered to them. Those things were important. So they're seated appropriately with me forever. But so Walter taught me about needle barf and scared the bejesus out of me. So thank you, Walter. Okay, everybody, that covers the tips and tricks for today. Thank you for stopping by. And just know that the way I do it is not the only way. I am not the sock police. I will not arrest you for it. If you find a way that works better for you, then use it. Please use it, because this is about finding your own way. I'm showing you what works for me. Take it, modify it, make it your own, throw it in the trash. I don't care. Have fun. Enjoy your CSMs. Bye.